to voice their concerns in this survey.
General Sikola, if I could just follow up. You seem to be expressing the most trepidation about this change because of the kind of units that you're representing. Can you see in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, that women will be in Rangers, in the Rangers, in the SEALs? And why do you believe this is happening right now?
The first of which, we got to let the process work. And I mean, we owe it to America. We owe it to the young men and women that are listening to this press conference. I have got to be the honest broker in this process, and we got to let it work. So I don't want to predispose anybody or this process to my personal opinions on the subject. I just want to see what happens. And so I really can't answer your question at this time.
Have you had any problems with women being in these smaller combat commando units that have already been out in Afghanistan?
I don't think we have. I mean, there's always going to be significant issues, no different than the problems we have with some of the men. We've had some discipline problems, not many. So far, I think it's been proven to be a huge success. Frankly, we wanted to institutionalize the capability of the cultural support team. So we are looking at expanding that and sustaining this. And this all predates the current initiative we're talking about. So it's a proven successful program that we intend to continue.
Why it's happening, we might have some by now. I think we should.
Why now?
Well, going back to where we were in January, so this has essentially been a 3-year-long process. The department did a review of women in service across the board, and then in February of 2012 we came forward and Secretary Panetta did away with the co-location rule, and we opened about 14,000 positions. And he directed the services. We continued forward for the next year, and then eventually leading to November, the Joint Chiefs unanimously came forward to the Secretary of Defense and said, okay, we've done everything that we can do, and the time is right to do away with the 1994 Direct Ground Combat Assignment Policy so we can get to these hard questions and start doing the work on the standards and the analysis that needs to be done. So this is just the next logical step.
Joanna?
General Scully, this one's for you also. When you look, you said you're more concerned, as Leah mentioned, with the physical, less concerned with the physical standard, more concerned with the cultural, social, and behavioral standards. So as you look at these surveys that you're going to be implementing, what are you going to see that's really going to make you say, you know what, this isn't going to work? I mean, if a lot of your operators, these quiet professionals, are saying, I don't know, I don't want women beside it. It's going to be too tricky. The privacy stuff is going to be tricky. I mean, it's going to be pain. It's not going to be as much fun, or we're not going to like our jobs as much, and we might leave. Is that going to be what it takes for you to pull the plug on this? What's going to stop you from doing it?
I think that's just one data point. I mean, that's just we have multiple initiatives going on. I've outlined all 4 of them. So once again, I don't want to continue to bang the drum on this process, but I want to let it work. I think we owe it to everybody. And when I talk about our standards, the world's constantly changing. We constantly review those standards, so they're not antiquated. Less than a year ago, I was the commander of the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center, and so I was tasked with, civil affairs, psychological operations, and the Special Forces Qualification Course, and we entirely revised those standards based upon a post-Afghanistan 21st century environment that I need to prepare these young men for. So that's why I can say with a little bit more confidence that I wasn't as concerned with the actual standards, more so with the social implications. But I really just want this process to work. And it'll just be an additional data point for the commander.
We'll go Chris and then Craig.
I guess this could be for anyone up there, but what happens if you do get a female candidate who passes all of the qualifications, but there are no other women who do? Would she be in a position where she would have to wait for other women to catch up to her before being allowed in some of these elite units?
I'll just talk in general terms, not especially about a type of unit. But I think the first step is the decision point as you've gone through the gender integration studies, at least in the Army's case, and you've gone through the occupational standard study, is to open the MOS. They're open now because of the recension, but say, okay, we're good with this, we're moving forward. Once that happens, then women go to the MOS and they pass the course, they're in the MOS or they're in the skill set and they go forward. So I think you have to look at it the other way. It's not just that we have this sole person, this sole soldier that got through everything. We're going to make that decision and then it's open. And if one person raises their hand and comes forward, then since it's open, they go forward and they graduate, hopefully. Maybe
Well, I guess that's my point. After, as we saw with the Marines, I mean, being open doesn't necessarily mean that you have women who will physically be able to complete some of these courses, but if and when you do, would she have to stand there with 4 to 5 other women, or if there is one woman who qualifies, would she be allowed in on her own?
I think I have to go back to what I just said. You've got to make the decision that military occupational specialty is going to continue forward. Once you make that, just like today, if one woman comes into a medic course, she goes forward into that medic course. We don't stop and wait for her to get 5 more females to join her. I mean, the bigger question is your occupational standards right? Are the tasks right? And are the cultural aspects all brought together to go forward? So I'm not trying to push away your question, but I think you're going to make a decision to open. When that decision is solid, you go forward. You don't hold back to different numbers. There's a difference between starting where we are today versus starting in the future.
I guess just not to belabor the point, but again, it seems like 2 arguments are being made. On one hand, we want to open this, but on the other hand, these are units or MOSs where women have never served before, and we don't want to set them up to fail, and so we want to have some sort of structure. And so again, I go back to my point. Do 10 women have to pass, or can one woman enter one of these elite units?
Can't tell you the numbers today, but I can tell you we opened up 6 new MOSs last year in artillery and maintenance, and over the course of the year, we enlisted 130 female soldiers. And as those 130 female soldiers come in the course of the year based upon when they graduate high school or other cases, we put them in groups and sent them forward. They're not all going in 130 to 1 unit or 6 or 4. So a lot of it depends on who enlists. You have to come back to who enlists. So again, I'm not trying to put you off, but I think that's a premature decision here. The more important decision is the task, the conditions and standards. And then once we're going down, we made the decision, unless we say we can't go forward, we have to come back to the Secretary of Defense and ask for permission to close the MOS. You're going to have to go forward. This is going to be about propensity to serve and who comes in the MOS. And I'd be happy to take more of that offline with you afterwards if you want.
Craig?
General Sokola, Craig Whitlock with the Post. I hear the Army and the Marines talk about gender-neutral standards, and I think most Americans would understand that, whether someone has the strength or physical dexterity to lift and spin a tank shell, something like that. But I hear you talking a lot about behavioral, cultural, social reasons to consider. Are those legitimate reasons to keep women out of jobs like this? I thought the idea was to lift the exclusion, and you're talking about surveying special operators to gauge their feelings to see if they're okay with it. Are the standards different for your guys than for the other services?
I'm not comfortable with the term gender-neutral standards. We have standards, and they equate to an operational requirement on a battlefield. Our mission is different, so our standards are different.
But you talk about behavioral, cultural, social factors being some of the possible obstacles. Is that right?
Right, but once again, it goes to, we don't deploy in large formations. I mean, we send a 12-man A-team or even smaller into very austere remote environments by themselves. In many respects, they may be the only Americans serving in a particular country. And so I think we have to, that complicates, integration, and that's our concern.
But I guess, are there reasons that women wouldn't be able to meet certain behavioral, social, cultural standards?
I'm actually more concerned with the men and their reaction to women in their formations, quite frankly. But it's just too premature to answer that question definitively.
Say in it? Do they get a say in it, whether they're willing to accept women?
I think that's what the survey is designed to do. Ultimately, they have volunteered, they serve, and I would imagine they will do what they're told. But I need to give them a venue to voice their opinion, and that's the whole purpose of the survey.
Yeah, sure.
If I could just add on something that comment, I think it fits for the Army in this perspective. There's also I think we've all mentioned that we're success-oriented here. And you use the term, to keep women out. We're success-oriented. These surveys in our gender integration study, which we'll share with everybody, is about identifying hurdles that you may not see. We've got experience doing this in a lot of different times throughout history, and it's to how to make sure that those who enter, especially those that are entering the first time, are most successful. And there are social and cultural issues. We do this for men, too, over time. We constantly survey. We've surveyed these first 9 brigade combat teams, and we said, what's the feedback from the males that have never served with women before? And we take that and we say, oh, okay, here's something we haven't thought about. It might feed into education. It might feed into training. So it's about knocking down the barriers, but you have to understand it. So it's constant surveying and constant feedback to identify problems to overcome so we can set people up for success. I think that's probably all of us are going to do that and share that.
So we'll do Stephanie and then one more after.
For anyone who wants to answer, but particularly for you, we've been studying this for years. As you mentioned, we've had surveys. We've talked about this forever and ever and ever. I think people are going to read the news today and see 2018, 2015. Why does this take so long? Why can't we get this done any sooner? There are already women serving on the front lines. They're already doing a lot of these things. I can understand that there's some particulars with certain units, but why are we looking at 2, 3, 4 years down the road for this to happen? Well, when the Secretary and the Chairman made the decision to rescind the rule in January, they determined that responsible integration, again, setting people up for success, was going to take a period of time. And so understanding that, that's why he made this decision in January and then told them, you have until May to come back to me and tell me how you're going to execute this. But I think there is an understanding that review, validation of the standards, the studies that they're talking about across all dimensions, not just physical, but exactly the behavioral, the social, the cultural, takes time to do. And so, yes, some of the things we have, but I think there's an understanding that doing this right takes some time, which is why we have the interim milestones. They want the standards reviewed and validated by September of 2015. They want all studies completed, again, also by September of 2015, in order to lead to full implementation by January 1st, 2016. So understanding what you're saying, I think the key is setting it up for success and making sure that they have time to do it right.
I would just add, there's 2 things. It takes time to enlist and take people to school. For example, we're already through our 2013 enlistment. We're halfway into middle year of 2014. We have people that are enlisting today, but we don't have school seats for them until almost 9 months from now. So you buy that time when you enlist people to begin with. And I said the second thing is, I mentioned our approach is going to be integrated, and it's also going to be incremental as well as scientific. So as we make decisions, you'll see in our plan, we have some occupational specialties that will move forward with earlier than other ones. So it's not just we're all waiting to the very end. We're going to do these over time. So I think you have to look at the program in totality and then say, okay, there's an incremental approach here, and it's very logical.
Nice question.
For the Army and the Marine Corps, can I ask, do you envision a situation where you could open up a closed MOS like infantry or armor and allow women to come into that, but then continue to have some units remain all male? And essentially, if you have a small number of women, putting them into those career fields, into some units, but having basically some infantry units which are co-ed and some infantry units which are all male. I mean, do you think that does this policy allow for that type of situation without exemption? And do you think that would have some value?
I think we'll examine that, and I think there's a couple of our allied countries, I could be wrong, but I think the IDF does do that, where they only have certain units that they allow, or as you said, co-ed, and a lot of that's based upon national demographics and what they need to do. So I think we'll look at all those things as we move forward. You know, the Army, particularly in the reserve components as well, we have to consider every aspect of that.
So it is a little bit premature to make that call right now. We're also looking at some of the extensive work that other nations have done, as the Israelis among them, as well as the Australians and the Canadians, as well as the UK, who have taken many years to do what we're doing in a relatively short time. We do want to make sure we do this thing the right way, and we're going to look at everything, but it's too premature to say where they would go exactly right now until we get our full depth and breadth of our analysis complete.
So our team has a follow-on mission, so we don't have time for stay-behind questions. So thank you very much, ma'am. Sir.
Thank you.